Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. Technology has allowed athletes to benefit from high-fidelity, real-time feedback to boost performance. So how could this work in your business? Well, software development company OnLoop is using artificial intelligence to provide ongoing performance feedback at the touch of a button and promising to make annual performance reviews a thing of the past. CEO and co-founder Projjal Ghatak says the mobile app automatically writes objective reports based on feedback and self-analysis. Speaking from Singapore, Projjal starts explaining to Jeff Waters just how companies can use OnLoop to empower their employees.
The way we think about it is that if companies allow individuals to get a full view of where each of them stand today, and what needs to happen to get to the next level, be it the next promotion or a bigger role. That's what employees are craving. And that can be done through obviously coaching, or it can be done through technology products. It can be done through better managers, a variety of things that help each individual get clarity on where they stand and how to get to the next level.
Well, in a traditional sense, people used to have a performance review every year where they would check off their performance with KPIs, and it's often a bit vague and difficult for the employee and a very daunting process that you often walk away scratching your head wondering what just happened. So how can you change that situation?
High-performance feedback loops have been applied to every performance realm, right? If you think about sports or you think about theater, people get better by receiving high-fidelity feedback on a regular basis. Some of that hasn't made its way to companies at scale. And if we can inspire and imbibe behaviors that allow individuals to get rich feedback on a much more consistent basis, they can iterate a lot faster. And that's what is missing in orgs today. And that's where the performance review process has really failed people in giving them the right developmental richness to get better. And if you hear something for the first time in your performance review, it's probably too late.
Indeed, it's often a year too late. So that sounds like a very big job for the manager or the owner of the company to have to provide constant feedback without dispiriting their staff. How do you propose that they should go about that?
Yeah, another sort of misnomer around feedback is that feedback is necessarily constructive. Actually, strengths-based feedback, or pointing out what someone's doing really well, is actually even more important than constructive feedback. And what people tend to do is when something goes well, they'll say, good job. And that's the greatest disservice they often do to their folks. But if you can point out the specific behaviors that in a room you asked amazing questions and handled objections and had executive presence, and that's why that meeting went incredibly well, that is very helpful for people. So we often talk about helping individuals identify and hone their superpowers and then grow awareness of their blind spots, because you're not necessarily going to change everything that you're not great at. But if you have awareness for them, you can mitigate either by improving somewhat or hiring around it or delegating it to people who might have that skill set. So unfortunately, feedback as a topic has made people run away because the implementation of it has felt like something that's scary. But really what it's about is giving people both affirmative and constructive observations of what's going well or not well on a much more consistent basis. Often we will also push individuals to do self-feedback, so to self-reflect. Often that's a huge body of insight too. And often individuals know they just need to spend a little bit more time to reflect on their own behaviors and their own performance. And you can aid that, again, through coaching or through technology to help individuals do that better.
Well, how can technology help? Because otherwise it sounds like you're talking an awful lot of paperwork.
Yeah. If in our company, for instance, the way we do it is through a mobile app that makes it very easy to capture a bite-sized piece of feedback that also has behavioral tags around what behaviors were exhibited in that situation. So the product comes with a set of default tags, but then managers can add their own custom tags so that people can better identify what competencies or what behaviors they're really good at and what they can get better at.
So the manager or the employee just goes into the app and clicks some buttons or some indicators, and that builds up a picture over time. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's a combination of tags as well as some qualitative input into what the situation, behavior, and impact was, which is sort of the most common model or framework for feedback. It also has some templates to offer suggestions. So obviously, the more input you give, the better. But even if you point out the right behaviors in the form of tags, that actually compounds to give you a full view of a person over time.
And how does your software build, if you like, a narrative of that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of progress in what is now commonly known as generative AI. So generative AI is able to take a disparate set of inputs and come up with something that's original and unique. And that can be a text, it can be a video, it can be audio, it can be an image. Where our technology focuses on is on language models and generating text. And so what we do is we take these disparate observations that people have and run it through OpenAI's GPT model, which is sort of one of the more well-known large language models. And that model is then able to take those phrases and write out a narrative. So it knows how to construct a cohesive story from bullet points or phrases that are less stitched together well. And what that can now do is shift the manager or the individual's focus to making the observations versus writing the review, where today most of the time that people spend has gone into writing this review, which actually doesn't really aid the development of the individual, but takes up a lot of time. So we are trying...
And it's also not objective.
That's correct, because there's a ton of recency to it, and it's what you remember versus what actually happened. So technology's come a long way in aiding us, and that's where there's a lot of debate on, is AI good or bad? And the reality is, like most things, it goes back to how it's used. And for us, we have a huge opportunity to help individuals get better and do feedback better by using some of these modern technologies that are very, very new.
Here's a hard question, perhaps, but for some people, this might sound a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them?
The reality is that the AI is an input, not a final answer. And so we always have to think about AI as an aid to the ultimate human decision-making or judgment, right? So when we create the summary in the product, we're not sending it to the end user. We're sending it to you for editing to then go out. And the same thing with self-driving cars, right? And any sort of newer technology, it doesn't have to be binary 0 or 100. So we should be thinking about all of these technologies as aids that can help us save time, that can really accelerate getting from 0 to 80. And then you do the touches or the edits to get that over the line versus having it to work wholesale every time, because it is new technology, and sometimes it writes stuff that is weird and not 100% accurate, and that's happened to us in situations. And so we put disclaimers around saying, hey, this has obviously been written by experimental technology. Please take a look before forwarding to anybody or taking a look. So you got to put the right checks and balances around it and make sure it's used the right way, much like guns or any other technology that exists, right? So,
all right. So hypothetically, as an employer, I have used this over a period of time, 6 months or a year, to enter in my assessment of an employee, and they've done the same for their own self-assessment. And when I hit go or ask the artificial intelligence to write a story for me, what sort of thing do I see? What form does that come back to me in?
Yeah, so you actually get an email, and that's an email summary which lists out actually all of the goals that the person was working towards, as well as what progress they've made. That's not generative tech. That's just us compiling that for you, and then a paragraph written by GPT to summarize sort of what we call the person celebrates, or the things that went really well, as well as the top tags and the frequency that shows up. And similarly, for improves, we also convert that into a well-written paragraph, and then the top tags around areas of improvement. So that comes today in email form. We're actually thinking of even converting that to a PDF that can be shared. We do it in email today because people might want to edit it, versus a PDF that's harder to edit, because the intention is to give people a draft that they can then finalize. But once you press generate a Prism summary in the product, you then get an email.
That was Projjal Ghatak, CEO and co-founder of OnLoop. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.